Hello, hello, everyone. It is a beautiful sunny day, and I'm sitting here with a delicious cup of caramel coffee. So let's get started today. Our focus is going to be the rise and the fall of the Song Dynasty. And as we begin, we're going to start with the Lao and the Jin challenge and the Five Dynasties period. The Tang dynasty was permanently weakened by 755 after rebellion, and as you guys know, their downfall really came after the Tang began protesting and suppressing Buddhism. China would be reunified by the Song in 960. Before that happens, though, there are, well, obviously the five dynasties, but also the rise of two major powers. We'll talk about them in just a moment. The period between the Tang and the Song, 907 to 960, is known as the Five Dynasties because there were smaller regional governments and not one unified China. However, a general overthrew one of the younger child rulers of one region and founded the Song dynasty. And this new leader kept in place most of the bureaucracy of the Tang with the emperor on top. The government was divided into six different ministries, and then China itself was divided into 220 prefectures, which had the largest administration unit under the Tang. The Song did face an outside threat from the Khitan, which are a nomadic people in Mongolia, and they formed an alliance with another northern people, the Jurchen of Manchuria. And this is why that matters. Because the Jurchen become a friend and then they become the enemy. The Song held off. Sorry, Belle just jumped on my lap. Belle, go away. Mommy's working. Go away. Um, where was I? Sorry. The Song had this alliance with the Jurchen people, and they had superiority in horses over the Song. And they also adopted Song gunpowder weapons, which of course the Song got from the Tang dynasty. And these weapons could be very simple or very complex. What happens is the Lao state is formed and it's made up of nomads as well as settled agriculturalists. And there is tension, if you will. The Lao had a strong military and they forced the Song to give them annual payments of cash and silk in return for peace. And to rid themselves of the Lao people, the Song and the Jurchens teamed up. And as a result, the Lao are then overthrown. Pardon me. The Khitan ethnic group ends, but the Jurchens then turn on the Song. And this is how the northern Song end up collapsing, and the permanent Song, the one that we'll be studying, is mostly in what is modern day southern China, because the Jurchens defeat the northern Song. They push them out, and it becomes one of the largest migration of people in human history. Northern and southern China were divided not just geographically, but culturally as well. The Jurchen ruled northern China using the Song as a model of state, and the Jurchen and the southern Song signed a peace treaty in 1142. The Song would continue to reign China as the Southern Song Empire until 1279. But if you want to go back real quick, take a look at this region. This is where the Jurchens are from, the Liao Empire with the ethnic Khitan people. And then the Jurchens end up taking over this region, and the Song end up ruling here. So this is what's left of the Song. And the Song dynasty is never politically powerful. I mean, as you can see early on, they're reduced by quite a bit. Their size shrinks considerably, and they end up being conquered by the Mongols. However, there are many advances made under the Song, culturally speaking, as well as technologically speaking, because they use gunpowder as a weapon. Now, gunpowder is actually invented or discovered, if you will, by a Buddhist monk under the Tang dynasty, but it is the Song who really figure out how to harness it and they start using it as a weapon. The first weaponized use of gunpowder is actually in the form of a bomb, simply because firearms were not available in this region yet. Under the song, foreign trade expanded greatly because of a new type of boat called the junk. You also have the rise of Neo-Confucianism because of the suppression of Buddhism with the Edict on Buddhism under the Tang Dynasty from 843 to 846. Just giving you a quick little recap from last week's podcast. Continuing with, markets were strictly monitored and controlled by the government. Before all changes, farmers grew their own food and they exchanged it in a barter system, but the government then decides prices, and farmers begin to grow cash crops and sell craft items as well to sort of make up for this, this new change. This would be called the Commercial Revolution in China, and it goes from about 900 till 1276. The Song pre-industrial era was pretty impressive. There are lots of changes in agriculture, and you really see the rise of a very powerful southern China. In northern China, you have wheat and millet growing because rainfall is considerably lower. And northern China had always looked on southern China as sort of backwards because they were not as quote unquote progressive. Northerners who moved south settled in the highlands and drained swamps. And from this, the southern farmers were able to grow different kinds of rice. By 980, China's population had shifted south. Rice has the highest crop yield per acre than any other crop on Earth, so this explains the population boom. In addition, under the Song, you have specialized production. You have the government monopolies, but you also have private businesses in which guilds begin forming. Silk, porcelain, iron, all controlled by the government. You also have expanding trade markets, again, because of the junk. Internal expansion caused by the population growth led to continued operation, continued work on the Grand Canal. For the first time, paper money is being used. The Song improved on the compass as well. There's an improvement in naval technology. So as I said before, the junks, they're boats that are not made for the ocean. They're actually made for traveling along rivers, which is why they have a flat bottom, because the river is considerably shallower than an ocean. Let's talk about the economy for a little bit. Movable type. Gutenberg was not the first person who did that. Here's the thing. Block printing originated in making rubbings on first wood and then stone carvings. And after 1040, the first movable type printing was invented. And as China moved to a market economy, it was necessary to produce more cash. Popular market items included oranges, tangerines, and rubbings of inscriptions. And around the year 1000, the Song introduced the world's first paper money. The cities were quite crowded, they were large, but they were very well managed, which is why we're going to read the primary source, Attractions of the Capital and the Adventures of Marco Polo, because he actually writes about what he's seeing. And even though these cities are large, even though they're crowded, they're very, very well organized. The flying money was the interregional credit system that used government-issued paper money. It didn't quite work, trial and error. Paper money caused massive inflation. It's eventually withdrawn. And the Song government was not able to control the market economy as closely as the Tang had done. Certain government functions, including tax collection, were privatized, and a new merchant elite thrived in the cities. Their wealth obviously comes from trade rather than land. What I do want to mention, though, is that under China, block printing, movable type thrives. It was not actually the Chinese who invented this, though. They got it from somebody else. So stay tuned with me for our next podcast after this. We're not done, by the way. Don't get your hopes up. But stay tuned for the next podcast, and we'll discuss who actually invented block printing and movable type. Now we're going to talk about iron smelting. In addition to food production, iron production also increased. And you have metallurgists who are producing wrought and cast iron. And some metallurgists were sophisticated at casting iron, and they could make an entire pagoda in pieces, which is pretty impressive. In addition, there was no mass production via assembly lines. That would be under the Ming Dynasty. But There was so much available labor that iron items were produced in very large and expensive quantities. And Song metallurgists could also make steel, which is much stronger than iron. Doesn't rust as easily either. The forests were depleted of wood for housing and also furnaces because smelting iron takes a lot of heat. So that is a problem. As technology grows, you do have the mass deforestation throughout China. Song China, guys, this is pretty impressive. Song China produced more iron per person than any other nation until Europe began the Industrial Revolution around 1700. That's pretty awesome. So what you can see here is the Song Dynasty, the iron smelting process, and the Yuan Dynasty, water wheel and blast furnace. Society. Song society was dominated by civilian officials, and there's a higher value on civil pursuits than military affairs because, again, the Song are never militarily strong. And again, they're bringing back Neo Confucian philosophy. And certain Buddhist sects, especially Zen Buddhism, tend to be pretty popular. The civil service exam, which was introduced in the Tang, reached mature form in the Song. And it broke the domination of a hereditary aristocracy by allowing men to be chosen for government services based on merit. The biggest problem that you're going to run into with that, though, is that if you're from a lower class family, you're probably not going to have the time to spend on studying because what you're talking about is not just go to work, come home, and study for a few hours. Studying is your job, and you spend about 12 to 14 hours a day doing that, generally living in a small little shed while family members bring you food so as you're not to be disturbed. There's 2 rounds of written exams and 1 final oral exam. And originally, these exams were open, examiners knew the candidates, and the men who passed still had to work their way up the bureaucracy. But the content of the exams changes over the centuries, and it focused on memorizing, recognizing, and working with Confucian texts. As the exams become more competitive, there was more cheating. And as they become more competitive, some men begin choosing not to go into government services. Now, keep in mind, if you were caught cheating or if you failed this exam, it was highly dishonorable. And a lot of people who failed this exam committed suicide because they had brought shame on their family. All right, we're going to talk about song women. And it is under the song that a popular custom begins that would last for hundreds of years. Under the song, women begin to enjoy increased educational opportunities because there's so much economic growth due to culture and technology changes. Tomb epitaphs reveal what kind of woman was most admired in the 12th and 13th centuries. And these epitaphs emphasized appearance and ancestry, so women who were attractive from good families. They praised the skills of running household finances and educating children. They often exaggerate virtue as well, reporting how people should behave rather than how they actually did behave. And in the song, women could divorce, but they could not initiate the divorce, and women generally did not remarry. Southward migration brought great wealth, and there were fewer class distinctions. However, the distinctions between those classes, it is possible to move up. There's not as great a stigma as marrying someone who's not in the exact same social class as you, as long as there were certain gifts given, dowries, and as long as a girl had attractive feet. And we're going to talk about that. A woman's status, how attractive she was, it's not always about her face. It's about the feet. Women were subordinate to men. They lost their rights to own and manage property. But here's the thing, this is a trend that really ensures that a woman is subordinate to a man, and this is binding the feet. Bound feet became a mandatory status symbol for elite women. However, a woman from the lower class didn't bind their feet yet. That would happen later. The only woman who would not bind her feet would be a woman from either a very poor family where she's working in the fields alongside her husband. Servants did not bind their feet as well. Um, how this works, and I'm going to explain to you guys how the process of binding the feet actually work. Um, the first evidence of this shows up around 950, and there's a lot of different theories as to why this began. But like I said, it starts with higher class women, and eventually all women are doing it except for the very low class. And if you want to get married, you have to bind your feet. It just becomes a custom. And how it works when a girl is young, between the ages of 3 and 7, it's sort of the step into womanhood. The four littlest toes are pressed down against the ball of the feet, and the big toe is left out, and there are bindings that are wrapped around the foot. And I'm sure you can imagine this is very painful. What makes it even worse is that after this occurred, a girl was told, okay, get up and start walking. And this would go on every day, laps around a room, if you will, trying to walk on her toes that are now pressed under her feet. Eventually, the four toes would break, and then they would be pressed flat against the foot, rebound, rewrapped, keep walking. Over time, the middle bone in the foot, in between the heel and the balls of the feet, it would be your arch, would break. And you can see in the picture, this would break, and then you would sort of take one end of the foot and the other and press it together, rewrap it, keep walking. And in the end, this is what the foot looks like. Very small. The ideal foot was about 3 inches. Now, what you need to know is that 1 in 10 girls died from this. Generally, they died from blood poisoning because the foot is broken, it is breaking, it is healing. But occasionally, girls would die from blood poisoning, the broken bone getting infected, going into septic shock. This practice went on until it officially ended when the Republic of China began. But unfortunately, not everybody was. Keep in mind, China is very large. There were regions that were very cut off. And this, in some places, this practice actually went on until World War II. But as you can see, very, very painful, very tiny foot, though. Now, something I want you guys to think about, though, this was considered beautiful. This was attractive. And a woman's husband never saw this. He only saw this. Even to bed, a woman wore her bindings, stockings, and then she had special sleep slippers that she would wear over it. And then these are her day shoes. These shoes are all handmade. And there's actually it's a quick video you can watch on a shoemaker in China who still makes these shoes for women with bound feet. Because there are still women alive with bound feet. Now, something I do want you guys to think about, though, what is beauty? And that just depends on the culture and where you're at. So if you look here, you have a lip plate. Can be compared to the ear, the gauges in the ear. You have the tribe where brass coils are put around the neck. Now, this does not actually elongate the neck. It merely pushes down the clavicle to create the illusion that a neck has been elongated. The high heel, oh, that's pretty until you get bunions that you have to have surgically removed. Just saying. And then the custom that was in the US as well as England, you've got the corset. This is not natural. You can see what the corset does. This is what a woman looks like pre-corset. Put the corset on, her ribs are compressed down, her intestines are pushed down. Yeah. But that's what a woman had to do in order to look attractive and be considered attractive. And a lot of women, we talked about how 1 in 10 women died from foot binding. Well, guess what, guys? A lot of women died from complications of wearing a corset. There's actually a well-known incident believe it's a poet's wife, Emerson, perhaps, who his wife had a seizure and died, because while she was sitting next to the fire, this is pretty bad, folks. Her skirts went ablaze, and she ended up dying from this. So while that occurred, she also had a seizure. And then the flames engulfed her, and she passed. There's another incident where a woman also had a seizure, and during this began throwing up blood and died. And what they found during her autopsy is the wires. What happened is her oxygen was cut off. She fell, had a seizure, and then the wire that was holding the corset actually broke and stabbed her in the heart. So that one, she died as a result of the seizure. With the poet's wife, was it the seizure that caused her to fall down and then the embers caught her fire? Or we don't know what happened first. It happened very quickly, but it's a result of corset and the style of dress she was wearing. So things to think about. All cultures do things that will make them more attractive. Under the song, there were many, many accomplishments. You've got new types of porcelain that are made. It's translucent porcelain. You have the invention of movable type printing press. There's an image of it, as you can see here. That idea was borrowed from somebody else. Again, the flying money. Song inventors were improving on earlier Chinese inventions, the magnetic compass, the stern post rudder, and watertight bulkheads. And shipbuilders in the Persian Gulf actually took these to improve upon them. The song had a standing, professionally trained, regularly paid military, which is also pretty impressive. Even though they're not powerful, they do actually have a military. Iron and coal are very important. And the song produced large amounts of high-grade iron and steel for weapons and defensive works. They also use gunpowder as a weapon. So just a quick review of everything that we've talked about in one convenient slide, just for you. We're going to wrap up for today with the song. We'll talk tomorrow about new kingdoms in East Asia. We'll be focusing on Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. So have a great night, guys. Email me with questions. And as always, cheers.